Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 189. I've got a good friend, a guy I've known for well over a decade now. I've actually visited him in his homeland of Slovenia, and he was a great European tour guide. But he's also a guy who has a great presence in the United States strength and conditioning world, facility based in Seattle, to go along with his facility in Slovenia that he and his brother cooperate. Just a really, really insightful guy who's got an amazing story to tell, as you'll realize here really quickly. But more important than his story is the lessons that he's learned from it and the wisdom he has to share from working with athletes across a variety of disciplines, including baseball. So this is going to be a really good show. Lengthy conversation we had that delivered a lot of value. So I think you're really going to enjoy it. This episode is brought to you by AG1, the most comprehensive NSF certified for sport daily nutritional supplement I've ever tried. With so many stressors in life, it can be difficult to maintain effective nutritional habits and give our bodies the nutrients they need to thrive. As a father of 3 young kids and a co-founder of multiple businesses in multiple states on top of still being an avid exerciser, I know that busy schedules can really take their toll on us. Whether it's poor sleep, exercise or life stressors, environmental factors, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, we can often wind up deficient nutritionally. This is where AG1 can really help. It's a game-changing nutritional insurance policy. They simplify the logistics of getting optimal nutrition on a daily basis by giving you just one thing with all the best things. That's why I use it daily, as do several of my family members, and we recommend it to a lot of our top athletes. One scoop of AG1 contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients that work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet to support energy, focus, digestion, and recovery. And this can all happen for less than $3 per day and without taking multiple products. While most nutritional supplements come to market and stay stagnant, AG1 continues to obsessively improve this one holistic formula based on the latest research, producing over 50 improvements in the last decade alone. They invest in the most absorbable and natural source of each ingredient and go above and beyond in third-party testing to ensure their customers continue to receive the highest quality and best tasting nutrition habit on the planet. Whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it'll work for you, and it contains less than 1 gram of sugar per serving. They put 75 ingredients through the rigorous NSF certification test to come up with a safe formula that's trusted by some of the world's top athletes, including many of our own at Cressey Sports Performance. Right now, AG1 is giving our listeners a special offer of 10 free travel packets with their first purchase. Just head to drinkag1.com/Cressey and claim this special offer. These travel packets are perfect for supporting your immune system, energy, and gut health while you're traveling for games, training, or simply on the go. They can be great counterbalance to the less than ideal on-the-road food options that are out there for a lot of our traveling baseball players. So if you want to bridge the gap between deficient and optimal and give yourself the best chance of getting nutrient diversity, head to drinkag1.com/Cressey to get 10 free travel packets with your first purchase. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Cressey, Cressey. You won't regret it. Today's guest was born and raised in Slovenia and ascended through the junior and collegiate ranks to become a professional basketball player in the European leagues as well as the NBA Summer Pro League. After his professional basketball career concluded, he turned to his other true passion, strength and conditioning. He's the co-founder and co-owner of the Vigor Ground Gym in Ljubljana, Slovenia, and the owner of Vigor Ground Fitness and Performance in Seattle, Washington. At these facilities, he's trained thousands of general fitness clients and athletes in the NBA, NFL, UFC, MLB, and the college and high school ranks. Vigor Ground has become one of the leaders in continuing education gyms in the country, hosting over 80 seminars, certifications, and conferences in-house from the best coaches and presenters in the industry. His work has been featured in Men's Health, Stack Magazine, On It, in Entrepreneur Magazine, HBO Real Sports, Precision Nutrition, as well as CBS, Fox, USA Today, and ABC. Please welcome to the show, Luka Hocevar. Luka, welcome to the show. This is incredibly overdue.
I was just thinking about that, man. I mean, it's been too long since we've talked, period. But honored to be on the show, man. I mean, having a conversation with you is always a highlight, always good times, whether it's on a podcast or if it's in person, man.
Absolutely. You're an amazing European tour guide for us as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about the Slovenian roots, but and you'll be a really steadfast promotion for the Slovenian Tourism Bureau on this, I'm sure. So,
hey, listen, right behind Luka Doncic. He's number one, but I'm right there. I'm right
solid
there behind
second
him.
place. Nice. Well, so before we get to the nuts and bolts of preparing athletes and more specifically baseball players, I think your path is an awesome thing that we should hone in on. I think you trained with us as an athlete back in 2007 in our original CSP dungeon. Actually, it was CP. It was before we were Cressey Sports Performance, and had a cool basketball career yourself. But I don't think I ever realized until Anna and I went to Slovenia and we're hanging out with you in the mountains and visiting castles and seeing all that stuff, how crazy kind of your origins were. Just because I guess the timing didn't really register in the back of my head. So maybe talk about where you started and what your path was to where you are in the strength conditioning world today.
Yeah, and I'll do my best to keep it not too crazy long, but but get all the touch points I feel like that matter and that people can take something from. I mean, I was born in '81, which was still Yugoslavia back in the day, right? And when I was 7, we actually moved to London for about 4 years. My dad lost his job, so we went back. He stayed up there. So now it's like basically right around the wartime, right? But the war, we're fortunate. Slovenia was fortunate. The war is very short there. I mean, you could, how many? It's like days, month. But then it got really, really worse in Croatia and in Bosnia and then obviously Albania later on too. But we definitely felt those, I would say, kind of remnants of the war, from hyperinflation to, I would say, let's just say that politically and I was saying the country, things weren't that great. But I always, people always ask me like, how was it? And we're pretty hedonic as far as like human beings are, right? Yeah, you adapt to anything and everything. You're kind of like, well, you just kind of live your life. If you don't have a contrast necessarily, you don't know. But for me, it was like those were also the beginnings of where basketball was kind of my outlet. I started playing ball when I was 8 to 9 years old. I'd go to these basketball camps in Slovenia in the summers. I was 100% multi-sport athlete. I mean, you name it, I played it, right? From soccer to tennis, I played everything for the school. But ball kind of grabbed me around age 11, and I really started training a lot. And so there's this kind of phase of, from 11 years on, basketball became quite a bit of my life. Now, at the same time, there's these two kind of, I would say, competing stories that I was also a knucklehead. So pretty big one that is, and when I was like 13, 14, started getting involved with dumb things, crime, stealing, later on worse. And I legitimately, to this day, I'll say if it wasn't for basketball, I don't know where I'd be. Because at age, I was already playing like in Europe, in Slovenia, you play for the youth team of the pro team in basketball. So high school is not the thing. You play it, but really like the competition is in these like under 16, under 18, under 20, of the pro team. And so I was already at like 16, 17 years old playing for like our Division 3 pro team, getting a lot of exposure to that. In my mind, I was, I want to play pro basketball. You ask me about anything else, it's like, listen, I'm doing dumb stuff in the streets and I'm playing basketball. And once, when I was 17 years old, we as a team went to America to Eastern Invitational Basketball Academy, which is kind of like the number one. It's in Trenton, New Jersey. It's like basically where all the high school recruits go, all the college coaches go to see how you play. And the whole point of it was just to get this, U.S. experience, compete against the best. It was just meant to be an experiential thing. And I mean, one, I did really well. Two, I loved it. So it was a great experience for all of us, for me. And there was a coach there, Wayne Jones, that I played for on one of the teams. And he was like, hey, man, you ever thought about going to college in the U.S., right? And I was like, no, like I play pro ball, like I'm making actually money from doing stupid things at that point in time. And I never really thought about it, but he kept in touch with me that whole, when we came back, kept emailing me. He was from Denver. And that year I got in like a lot of trouble. Like a lot of stuff started happening where, I was like, holy, my coach was a huge influence on me. He said, hey, look, man, I know what you're doing. There's really no positive path in this direction, and I listened enough to him because, let's put it this way, I was getting enough trouble to where like, we're talking in life endangerment. Like, are you going to go to jail? And so at that point in time, Wayne's like, hey, why don't you, and he's emailing me. He's like, why don't you come to the IBC again, like next year? Come to Denver, train with me for 2 weeks, and we'll go to two of these camps. So I was like, okay, why not? I could pay for it myself out of pocket. I ended up doing that. Now I have zero idea how college basketball works, by the way. Like if you ask me at that point in time, how do scholarships work? When's the last scholarship given out? Like I don't know any of this shit, right? So I get there, we train really hard for 2 weeks at elevation. We go to the camps, I'm playing really well. And I got a bunch of D1 schools, Quinnipiac, Delaware State, Western Michigan, that are very interested. Now, this is July, right? Like end of July. So there is no scholarships for next year, right? And they're like, "Wait, we'd love you if you walked on, right?" I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean?" Well, you got to pay for year one.
Yeah.
And it's like every one of those schools, even back then, was like 45K.
And move
Uh,
across the world in the next 6 weeks.
yeah,
Relocate.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
So, and I remember having a call with my dad and bringing it up, and it was like I couldn't even, get through the third of the sentence. It was like, nope. It's like, nope. Um, but the coach that I played for at that specific camp was like, hey man, like, you're really good. I think that, I used to play and then coach at a school in upstate New York. It's a D2 junior college. And I like you'd play, like you'd start year one. So I started talking to him. And basically, I mean, I got back August 3rd. I remember I got back August 3rd and I was like, I'm doing this. It interestingly enough, I didn't even know this was upstate New York. It was like New York. Okay, New York. It's got to be the city, right? And I go to the embassy. They send me the paperwork. At that point in time, I realized this is in Binghamton. Third most depressing city in America at that point in time, statistically. And but I was definitely decided because I kind of knew like, look, this gives me an opportunity to still play basketball, gets me away from the dumb stuff that I was doing, it gets me into school, right? So I still get school, and I pulled the trigger, and basically, my flight, which I've shared on a couple of shows before, but it is my first day of school, or should I say the day that I was supposed to land in the U.S. was September 11th, 2001. So I was on a plane when about 20 minutes out from when the towers got hit, we were supposed to land, and we ended up, flying in. First, it was like, hey, do we go back to Frankfurt? We don't have enough fuel, so we just kept flying because the airspace ended up being closed, and then landed in Nova Scotia in Canada. And I was in a military camp for a week before taking the bus to the city and then going back upstate. And so that was kind of like my
Wow.
story of getting to the U.S. I did 2 years in Binghamton in junior college, got a full ride in Virginia, Intermont, Southern Virginia, another D2 school, and played there for 2 years before going overseas and playing pro basketball. Now, it's important, I think, I tell the story, but there's an underlying story of strength and performance that was a staple in my life this whole time. My mom opened up a gym when I was 13. And so she basically would work at the bank. Like, so when we came back, she went back to work at the bank, worked there half the day, the other half the day she'd work at the gym, and her friend would work the mornings. And this was like in Europe you have these physical culture buildings, right? This place was called Partisan. So at the top floor, I'm gonna say it was maybe 1,500 square feet, 2,000 square feet. Techno gym equipment, squat racks, dumbbells. A little spot. But I got, the only thing I can say is I got lucky because there was the top power lifter at 220 pounds in the country, worked out there. And at the bottom of the building was two guys, and one was Aliash Pagan. It's like I'm gonna say a lot of weird names that people are gonna be like, "What the hell?" Um, and but these guys were like, you know, Olympic medalists, like literally world champions in gymnastics to straddle. If you look them up for years, dominating, right? And they'd also come up to the gym. I mean, most of their stuff they work in it. They had a little gym at the bottom, gymnastics gym. It was like literally, I mean, a closet, right? But most legendary stuff comes from
Yeah.
places like that. But they'd come and train and they'd show me stuff, So I got this best power lifter in the country. I got these guys and they're kind of showing me the ropes a little bit. So I'm learning about, strength training for some very, very, very good role
Yeah.
models. But I was a super scrawny kid, like I was shorter than everybody. And it gave me like two things. I trained hard and I put on muscle. I got stronger. I'm on the court. Now all of a sudden I'm 14, 15. I can touch rim. I'm bullying others because folks are like, man, how'd you put on this muscle? And I was very dedicated to the gym. And not only that, it got me like really interested in training. So back, I'm sure you remember this, like Air Alert. like
Yeah.
the air alert programs, which were dumb, obviously, but it's like, I just buy that, and you buy the soul shoes, and then all of a sudden, I start finding things like Elite FTS and T Nation, and I'm reading Charlie Francis's Speed Trap, and like I'm buying all the stuff from Verkhoshansky as it's your skin, like I'm just diving into this stuff, which is where initially, when I started reading T Nation, is like I found like you and Mike Robertson, right, which is how the story all connects, and got obsessed with it. Now, at that point in time, if you ask me like, hey, do you want to be a performance coach or like, I'd be like, no, like I want to be the best basketball player. I want to dunk. I want to be the fastest. But, I think this is an important conversation because, one of my favorite books to recommend to coaches is, Be So Good They Can't Ignore You.
Yeah.
This whole conversation about deliberate practice and career capital. And
Yeah.
I tell this story because, I was building deliberate practice and career capital from the age of 13 when it comes to strength and performance training.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like once I made that decision, it was like, oh, I'm a newbie. And that's a very, very important, some context there for folks when it comes to, how good you want to be at this, how successful do you want to be at this? Because, when I got to college, I ended up, I'm kind of like, oh, I'm going to play ball. I'll take business management. But I was so into training, I did a minor in exercise science and kinesiology because they were like, oh, you got all these electives, that you like taking, I see. All you have to do is this and you can have a minor, right? But that was just pure, I was passionate about it, understanding the body and like knowing, I was in an athletic room talking to an athletic trainer. He used to be with the Bulls, asking him all these questions all the time. And he's like, dude, you're annoying, but I kind of like your fire about it.
Yeah.
I was writing programs for our collegiate team because we kind of didn't really have a strength and conditioning coach. Our coach was writing S&C stuff. I'm like, whoa, what is this? This is absurd. Like, you don't know anything about this, right? And my first kind of S&C gig was actually when I played for this team in Slovenia called Triglav. Like I'd write basically strength and conditioning programs for a bunch of the players because I was like 206 pounds, which is not, I'm 6 foot 206. I look more like a running back than I did a basketball player. And folks would think like, oh, you're gonna be slow, but I was tomahawk dunking, and I didn't get tired. And they're like, hey, who trains you? I was like, well, I write all my own programs. I just super geeky about this stuff, right? And that's how all of, I would say, my essentially career started, is that pro sports basketball is not always what it seems. My last year, I almost played for free because the team had they're a Division I team in Slovenia. They had financial issues, right? And it's like, no, we'll pay you. You don't get paid. You're like, hey, listen, I'm gonna go sue you. They're like, hey, if you sue us, we'll go back to the third division, go bankrupt, you won't get paid. I got so many crazy stories where it's like I'm doing 2-a-days and working for my brother Matej doing translating, which obviously Matej. And in between, I'm doing a workout in the morning, run around for him doing translation stuff, coach 4 to 5 people, right? Because I started training people, and then go back to practice in the evening, and made no money training almost, right? Remember charging like €5 a session, which $6. So you can kind of contemplate that was not a moneymaker, but I loved it though. And that's the thing I think that really flipped me into, because it was a very difficult decision to be like, I'm done with basketball. I dedicated, my life to it. I made it to the pros. I played for some really high level teams like Himik in Ukraine. NBA Summer Pro League. I made the tryouts out of 500 players to make a free agent team. There's only 24 spots for 2 free agent teams. But, so letting that go when, to me, a sport that saved my life, that like I gave everything to, and then you're like, what now? So for me, fitness and training really kind of saved me there, because I had this identity crisis and ended up, we started a gym. My timelines are, it's going to be close to 18 years now, the one in Slovenia. Then I left because I got married young and came to the US, started from scratch, LA Fitness and working on up. But that was for me, and I like to share this because I feel it is important. I didn't feel great about the things that I did in my teens as far as like being a criminal but what coaching gave me was like that I was helping people. And as corny as it sounds, like it was this like I want to tip the karmic scales, but I thought about it. I was like, man, like I'm not making anything really, but I feel the best when I leave a session of coaching somebody, right? Seeing them leave and they're like, man, this guy helped me. Like it was seriously, I got this kind of high that I still get today, like almost 20 years later,
Mhm.
in doing it. I really, really do. And so to me, that was like a little bit of a poke. It was like, hey, there's something here. And my brother once, we started doing kettlebell training really early. I mean, Pavel was my mentor. I mean, we did the RKC in 2004 in Denmark, right? I
Mhm.
mean, like a long, long time ago.
Mhm.
And and my brother was training a couple of his former soccer buddies, and he was like, "Man, like I can't keep training him anymore. Like, you want to take him over, just make some extra money." And I was like, "Yep." And after the session, they told my brother, they were like, "Hey, listen, man, like this dude has something. Like he talks shit, he coaches really well,
Mhm.
he makes you do more than you think you can. Like he just has the thing, a knack for it." And back then too, it was like that was kind of a good feedback loop for me because it got me fired up. Like, okay, cool. So it made me do more and more and more of it. And that was kind of like the beginnings of my coaching career. Was like while I was still playing pro, those last 2 years, I was already coaching and then doing progressively more of it. And then it's like when we started the gym in Slovenia. No, I went to my brother and said, "Hey, look, man, we got something here. There's because we were training people in the woods. There's this park called Tivoli. We'd bring the kettlebells out. There's trails. There's logs. There's pull-up bars, and it was like 3 people, and then it was six, and it was eight, and it was 12. Then it was all of a sudden it's like, whoa, something's going on here.
Mhm.
And I had to think, consultants tell me there's no market for it
Yeah.
because there was zero training gyms in the country, right?
Mhm.
Zero. Um, and I kept bugging my brother. I was like, I'm telling you, there's something about this. And that's how we eventually got like a 470 square foot room. And that was the beginning, it wasn't called Vigor Ground back then, but that was the beginnings of Vigor Ground. And I think 6 months later, I think we went to 2,200 square feet. Then I left. Then it was 4,000 square feet, and then now we're 11, 12,000. I'm trying to think if you've been to this last location, but I don't
Yeah,
think.
we were there in 2014. I know because we found out my wife was pregnant right before we
Okay, so
left. Yeah, so I think
so
we
you
saw
were,
the
yeah,
big one.
2014.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now we moved from that location to another
Mhm.
one,
Oh wow.
2 floors. I think this is kind of like the best location we've had yet. But
Mhm.
that story has obviously evolved in and of itself. I'm not like hands-on with that gym anymore, and started from scratch in Seattle. Went from big box gym, 900 square foot garage gym, 4,700 square foot gym, and then I bought a 12,000 square foot building we're now in. So it's again, I've tried to compress it. You know
It's
what I mean?
there's what's awesome is it's there's so many important lessons that you delivered kind of through that story, whether you recognize you did or not. I think the one that jumped out at me the most, and it's almost highlighted perfectly by the fact that you're surrounded by a bunch of books in your office right there, is like you were just curious. Like so many of the guests that I've had, I remember Sam Fold, who's now the general manager of the Phillies, was a guest on the podcast, and he talked about why being a player who was curious easy allowed him to transition into more front office roles. He was just always wondering how stuff worked, why certain guys played better than others, and like you just showed a level of curiosity around athletic development. And then the second part of that is you did what every good coach who's ever, thrived in this world has done is you served. You served your teammates, you served your clients for obviously pennies on the dollar. So I think there's just such huge lessons for people there. Be curious and try to find ways to deliver value or in your career. I think too often we see 25-year-olds who think that like they need to be compensated six figures right out of school and they've got all the answers. And no, like be curious, ask a lot of questions, find ways to deliver, and good things always seem to happen. Um, One follow-up question I had for you that fascinated me is when we were there, I distinctly remember somebody telling me that one thing about Slovenia was I think it was there were more professional and Olympic athletes per capita than any country in the world, right? Because there's a bunch of guys in the
Yep.
NHL. There's a real, famous alpine skiing contingent. Obviously, there's guys in the NBA that are thriving. It's big in professional soccer, all this stuff. Do you think there's something in the water there? Like, what is it? Is there a developmental model? Is it model? Is it a multi-sport participation at a young age? Is it just
Yes.
a very healthy demographic? Like, what is it that allows a small country like that to thrive so much on the national, international stage?
I'll give like I'll try to give an objective answer and a subjective answer just from my experience growing up. I certainly think that one of the thing is that there is this physical education culture, and if you go, and I often, like it was so cool when you came in 2014 because I love also sharing the country with friends, and like
Yeah.
and seeing it. But you go to Šmarna Gora, which is kind of like this hill outside of Ljubljana, and you're walking up and you're like, how's there so many people on these hikes, like in 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds. And so you see this activity, this physical culture activity. And, in the gym business, by the way, let me share how it shows in the difference, like for instance, between the US. Our struggle in the summers was, and they're a little bit less now, but it still is that like 50% of people during the summer would just pause their membership for 3 months
Mhm.
because they're like, hey man, I'm gonna be outside. I'm hiking, I'm walking, I'm playing sports, I'm right, like peace, and we're like, holy shit, our revenue's down 50%. So we did paid in fulls and we did all these different things now that helped out. But that just shows you that there is such a active physical education culture. And even the story that I told is like, these physical education buildings that they have basketball courts inside, outside, tennis, and a lot of it is subsidized. So it's very affordable for I would say for anybody that doesn't, make a lot of money, and you go out and you play. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
there's sports left and right. Schools have tons of things for kids to get involved with. And it's still now I would say it's not as good, I don't think, as it was when I was growing
Yeah.
up, but it's significantly better than the system here on that side of things.
Mhm.
So, that's my kind of objective, I would say. You know, I guess subjective and subjective way of looking at it is that if you create an environment, right, the
Yeah.
environment shapes us. And I think it starts there, that automatically there's just an environment for sports, for
Yeah.
play. And then because Slovenia sits in this really nice, you have mountains, you have skiing, which is
Mhm.
why there's a lot of the winter sports, but then you have the ocean, and
Yeah.
obviously former Yugoslavia, Croatia has tons of ocean. So you have water sports. And then, it's kind of nestled in between all those, the Balkans have always been a huge basketball kind of
Mhm.
area. And that's why you got, between Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia, Slovenia, I mean, the amount of NBA players, and
Yeah.
and not only that, like you're looking at two of the top five in the league running for MVP are a Serb and a Slovenian, right? Soccer, same thing.
Yeah.
Croatia and Serbia has always had a huge, I would say, tennis, I would say,
Yeah.
culture. So you have this kind of mix of, I think, where it also lays geographically,
Mhm.
that is also a factor. And you mix it together and you get that. And I mean, the numbers are pretty crazy. I remember,
Yeah.
growing up, a lot of the guys that I played with, growing up, ended up making it to the NBA. And there was I think there was 8 players in the NBA from Slovenia. Now you got to,
Mhm.
you know, two less than 2 million person country
It's
has
fascinating.
eight players, and it was at that point in time the most, players per capita
Mhm.
in the league were Slovenia at that point in time. And same thing if
Mhm.
you kind of zoom it out and you go the whole of the Balkans, which is again former Yugoslavia, that number is probably number one or it's number two. It's very, very, very high. But my lesson for that is that like if you go from a macro to a micro is like shape the environment because the
Yeah.
environment's going to shape you and it's going to shape the people in it. And we're I would say we're social creatures, so we adhere
Yeah.
to the standards of the tribe. So like if you're growing up, it's like kids are playing outside, they're part of this sport, this sport, this sport. It's easily accessible. Guess what? You're going to be with your friends playing. You're going to be with your friend in that sport, this sport, and these games. And then that obviously kind of just trickles along and creates a ripple that creates a wave. And I think there's a huge lesson in that. And is that I think that we both do that with our facilities, right? Because like you
Yeah.
shape the environment, so the environment
Absolutely.
shapes. And I love, we'll talk about the X's and O's and training, which I'm absolutely, still to this day such a geek about. But what I recognized is like probably about 10 years ago, it's like, hey, like we have to, behavior change and
Yeah.
psychology and environments. How do we shape that? Because
Yeah.
all the X's and O's don't matter if we can't get people to do stuff. And
Yeah.
like, what are these other factors that get people to actually do stuff?
The culture is the magnifier. It's far more upstream. It makes all that other stuff work better. It's awesome. And the thing, it's such a weird time in baseball right now. Obviously, injuries are off the charts, and a huge part of this is what's happening in the youth models. And it's just so fascinating to see a small country like that having success across a lot of disciplines versus like, you look at the Dominican Republic, one of the motivating factors for people to make professional baseball, the Dominican Republic is to, sometimes escape poverty and it's like Slovenia is a cool place to be. Like nobody's racing to get out of there. It's beautiful trees and like wonderful fresh air. Food's great. The people are wonderful. It's like this is just happening organically because the processes are so good and there's there's not this hyper specialization. Like it's far more fascinating for me to hear of all the NBA players coming from Slovenia than it is to hear of a lot of, baseball players coming from the Dominican Republic, where there is a hyper level of specialization. So it's a fascinating developmental model to me. I'm a big believer in looking at other sports to see how we can improve in our own sports. Basketball is obviously near and dear to your heart, but I know you've got a lot of experience in a collection of sports. You've done stuff in baseball. You've done a lot of stuff I know in rugby. What are some of the big lessons you think baseball players can learn from your work across those other disciplines? In other words, what's universal?
Hmm. I mean, here's the thing that, every sport is a collection of different physical properties, right? Like, and when I train, these last years I've been training probably the most NFL guys, football guys, and rugby probably. And then there's always a sprinkle of like baseball, basketball, and there's been kind of sometimes a roller coaster of like there's years where I'm like, oh, I'm training a lot of I would say baseball players or Major League Baseball guys, and but for me that actually I love that because it gives me insights into a lot of different things. But even when you talk to folks at the highest level, is again going back to this specialization conversation that starts young. You're getting folks that exceptionally good or have spent a lot of time in one area and very little in another area.
Mhm.
And we could, if you kind of go these four spokes of the wheel, I try to simplify things even for my athletes. Like, there's training, nutrition, recovery, mindset, right? I mean, because again, you could dive deeper, but the reality is like those boxes. And you'll see folks that have, spent a lot of time in training. And then if we dissect that, it might be skills training, but
Yeah.
very little in general physical preparation, quality movement, strength, working different aspects of that strength speed curve. And I'm still like, I'm talking to a guy that's making 10 million a year, drawing this stuff on it, and going like, hey, look, like, when we did this VBT test, your strength speed is not that great, right? Like you're really strong, but your strength speed and your power is not that great compared to, like these baselines. And they're like, like nobody's ever explained this to them. And then being able to convert that and go like, we don't need more strength. If we can maintain it, like, man, you're money.
Mhm.
But if we can get this up, like you're going to be a better athlete. Combining that with your actual skill in the field, like you'll be a better athlete. So that like clicks. And baseball is the same thing.
Mhm.
It's like, hey, what is it that I need? And as an individual, right? Because you'll get folks and it's like more static proficient, more dynamic proficient. And just being able to explain, like, look, we have this whole opportunity here. Like you're phenomenal. Like your pitching is excellent. But here's these gaps that like you don't decelerate well. Your rate of force production isn't that great. Your relative strength is pretty damn good. Let's take these opportunities and fill these buckets. And again, becoming as to me, it's like I still want to just be able to do everything I can to break
Yeah.
it down to like a 6 to 8 year old kind of language. Right? Um, but that's the thing that I've really, really found is and sometimes I still get blown away, right? Like where you're training folks that are making, multiple like 8 figures per year, right?
Mhm.
And it's like these concepts that me and you every day we're
Yeah.
studying, and you're like, whoa, like this is an aha moment for this guy,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, so now I start to see that kind of these small hinges that can swing big doors. And the same goes for nutrition. I
Yeah.
mean, I would say that 80 to 90% of the high level athletes, let alone college and high school athletes that I've coached, they're probably like a 3 to 4 out of 10 on their nutrition.
Yeah.
Right. If I say like the level of skill set is a 3 to 4. So if I can start turning those dials and get them to 6 or 7, not even a 9, I mean, they're sleeping better, they're recovering better, their energy's better. Now they're pushing harder doing a training session. I mean, listen, I don't even want to say names, but like, I get a lot of people that are coming in like, yeah, man, I just did a 4-day water fast. And, to not be like, what the, but oh, tell me a little bit more about that. What are you trying to do? What are you trying
Yeah.
to, conversation, get curious, seek to understand, not make people feel like they're dumb. Hey, what did you hear about that? What are you trying to do? Right. And then from there, ask questions and kind of help them trip over their own truth and educate. And that goes on every
Mhm.
level. Like I think people think that it's like, oh, Susie Sue needs that. I'm like, no, like Mr. Like I make 20 million a year needs that too. It's they just have different in those kind of four spokes. They just have different gaps. And I think that for us as strength and performance coaches, it's like finding those gaps. It really is. And you find those gaps through questions, assessment.
Yeah.
And when you put assessment, like assessment can range from all types of stuff: conditioning assessment,
Yeah.
strength and power assessment, speed assessment, movement assessment, right? And you kind of, I mean, I think that there's definitely a science and an art behind it, to where you start, you know, much faster seeing what you need to look at. But by the way, like, it all begins with communication.
Yeah.
Right? All begins with communication. And I don't know if I can't even remember. I think I might have been talking to Brett Bartholomew about this one. We're like kind of going through the definition of what coaching is. It's like three things. It's communication, problem solving, and technical expertise. And as I thought that was a pretty good
Yeah.
rounding of that, right? Like, which, by the way, you can't be a good problem solver if you don't deliberately practice problem solving.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot do it from a book. Like, you have to do it with reps in the gym, and ideally for me, it was like, it was such a, I would say, great timing, because to go back a long time. I mean, I must have been like, I don't know, 17 years now, 18, where I came out to Birmingham, England, to a seminar with you and Nick
Yeah,
Grantham,
that's
right?
right.
I was following, but the reason that was big for me, because it gave me like, you were so educated on the body and anatomy and movement and kinesiology, like that. For me, I was like, oh, like, I need to step my game up, and you became the standard for that. So I started geeking out about all of those things, right? And the reason why I believe that is important, because models, right? So with problem solving, well, let me give you the model for problem solving.
Yeah.
The apprenticeship model. Like, get around people that are excellent at problem solving. The feedback loop is so much faster if you
Yeah.
do that. It's like mind blowing. So by the time I started training some, I would say, big names or whatever prominent names in baseball, I was like, I felt confident, because I had like studied everything that you've ever done in baseball. And it was like, listen, like, and I know I would text you or get on a call with you, ask some questions, and that was exceptionally helpful. But it was a model to me. And so
Smart.
people have to get around, and I think that this has become less and less prevalent. And so that's why I'm saying on the
100%.
show, like, I still, I'm flying out to speak at Mike Boyle's at the end of this weekend. Like, I'm gonna fly in early, meet with 3 people from Boston, go train, check them out, go up to the facility. Like, I'm still constantly, like, trying to see what people are, oh, that was awesome. Why are you doing this? How are you doing that? And I feel like I'm extremely good at the thing that I do, but I always kind of feel like,
Yeah.
I'm a little dumb and I need to get better. I mean, that's the game. So I want to point that out and put it under a magnifying glass, that the problem solving part, like, if you don't get the reps in, you will not be great. It's just no way around it, right? Then you got the communication part, which I think is a huge obstacle for most people in the coaching industry. I see a lot of people with technical proficiency, which that aren't great communicators. So you can't get buy-in. You can't, I would say, relay what you want people to do and how to do it if you don't have buy-in, if you don't have clear communication. So every one of those is an opportunity, I think, for coaches. Now, we've talked about this, in years past as well. Like, I see a lot of folks coming up now that don't have the technical expertise,
Yeah.
right? It's like, you don't know anatomy, you don't know how things work and how things move, and that's not a good look. Like, you do have to, if you're going to be a pro, like an actual pro, like, you have to understand this stuff, right? And I mean, years apart, I still go back through, going through a pre-script certification now, probably going through the 3 certs right now. And honestly, some of it is just to refresh things. I'm going back through functional stability training, which is awesome products. I don't know when you put that out, but like, that was great, man. Like, and I think that what starts happening is, imagine if you're playing a sport, right? And let's take baseball, and that somebody was like, well, yeah, man, like, I pitched 4 years ago. I haven't really pitched much since, but I'm about to play the biggest game of my career. You'd be like, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, 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 whoa. That's not a good idea. We're probably going to put this other guy in that's been like playing the whole time and practicing, right? But somehow in coaching, this idea is just like, well, yeah, like, I did all that stuff back in the day. If you really believe in this craft, if you want to be phenomenal at this craft, like, you have to constantly, I mean, essentially, be banging on the samurai
Yeah.
sword, right? Heat, and making it stronger, making it better, making it firmer. And And I think that I wanted to share that because there's such a correlation between when we talk about opportunities for, helping an athlete. It's like, okay, how do you become a better coach? Okay, cool. We're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
We're looking at these pockets of how do we make, the athlete better, because there's certain things that we just can't, improve that much more. But there are these opportunities that we might not see that can make, them 7% better, 4% better, 10% better, which in that world, I mean, it could be 100 million bucks. It could be,
Yeah.
an MVP season, right?
Yeah, you dropped a line, tripping over their own truth. Like, I've never heard that, and I love it. I'm 100% going to steal it. But what it speaks to is there's an element of humility to that, which I think is an underpinning of all this stuff, right? You talked about like communication is first. Adam Bornstein, when we had him on talking nutrition, he's like, I'm nutrition agnostic. Like, there's no one way that works for everybody. So you have to be open-minded to just about everything. You have to be open-minded that you might not know the right answer for everybody, and you have to be aware enough to know that there's a lot of different disciplines out there that can help your athletes. I think too often we get people who are, hey, this is what worked for me. This is what I'm going to implement with these athletes, and it's going to work exactly the same for them. I'm like, well, it's not the case. We both know there are a lot of really high level athletes being successful via different mechanisms, leveraging different strengths to get to the levels they are. So I think that underlying, it kind of, refers back to a little bit we talked about with just being curious. Like, you have to have an element of humility to be open-minded enough to be curious, to ask questions, to kind of play dumb and help athletes, kind of find the answers themselves. Let's talk about the actual, program design and coaching elements. Like, are there certain aspects of them that you think are going to be applicable across all sports? We've spoken in more generalities and things like that, but if you're talking to a 24-year-old that, is saying, hey, he just said some people aren't technically there. What are the things from both, program design and coaching that you think are really applicable that people should know, whether they're dealing with basketball or football or baseball or whatever it may be?
I've always been, I mean, obviously, Mike Robertson's R7 model, right? Like,
Yeah.
I've taken that, but here's the thing: is it's so malleable, and I think I love things that are malleable, right? For anybody that kind of hasn't heard, I'll run through it just real quick. But R7, because it's simplified to understand, right? We have release, which is, soft tissue, and strategies, which could be a lot of different things, right? Like foam rollers or crossballs, whatever else it may be. And it's like every session should have R7. So we'll kind of micro jump in and go macro out on this one. R2 is a release. Release it does two different things. Sorry, not release, reset, right? Reset's two different things. Either it's the nervous system, we're getting folks from usually more sympathetic to a little bit kind of more baseline autonomic nervous system. So that could be breathing drills, box breathing. I love positional breathing because you're not going to spend, 10 minutes doing a lot of this stuff. And some of it is just like putting, joints, I say putting joints, but getting joints in a better starting position.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the other thing. And I know you've taken so much and have so much knowledge around this. I've done a whole bunch of PRI stuff from DNS to FRC,
Yeah.
FRA. I mean, you name it. To me,
All the
all that's,
acronyms, right?
yeah, I mean, just kind of goes down the list. But
Yep.
really, to me, all it's been has been a toolbox, right?
Yeah.
If you understand principles, and then it's like, I'm going to use these different things from the toolbox to see what's best for this specific athlete or person, right? From there, we go to readiness. Readiness is a dynamic warm up. And really, for me, dynamic warm ups are opportunity when I write programs, is to work on the stuff that these folks need to work more on. Because
Yes.
unfortunately, I love, so I don't know if I created this. I probably stole it somewhere too, who knows, but like movement hygiene, right? Many years ago, I was on Sean a model health show, and I was like, you brush your teeth. To me, it's like you have movement hygiene. And I'd love for people to do this every day. But unfortunately, when I create the protocols for athletes, some do it, most don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
So dynamic warm-ups for me is like, hey, you know what? You got crappy scapular upper rotation.
Yeah.
We're going to plug that in. You don't have good thoracic rotation. We're going to plug that in. You don't have good internal rotation of the hip. Cool. We're going to plug that in. So that's going to essentially be, and then we're going to ramp it up to where things become obviously from simple to complex, from slower to faster. Almost always, I'm going to do some type of, running drills and I would say extensive plyometrics. Because again, these are things that I know folks won't do, and it's a double whammy. All right. So we're getting folks more reps on the things that they need. And it's also like it's going to prep them for the session. Right. Now, heart rate's higher, nervous system's fired up, we're ready to go. So that's R3 readiness. Everybody's going to have that. It's going to look a little bit different. And, if I scale it down to, because my whole model now for program designs, this athlete for life idea, right? If you're 40, if
Mhm.
you're 50, honestly, this framework is going to be similar, but we're just going to change a lot of how much you do of what and what is the level of it going to be. From there, you got R4, which is reactive. And this is kind of what gets interesting, right? To me, this is, I would look at that kind of continuum. What is reactive? Is it just plyometrics? No, it's all plyometrics. It's jump training. It's speed training. It might be strength speed. It might be pure power work, right? But I will say that depending on the time that I have in a session, I've worked with pro sports team where I got 42 rugby guys. I got a varsity and a JV team from high school basketball in Bellevue, or I got, like 5 NFL guys in a session, right? And like that's going to look different for how much time I have. And R4 reactive may be after dynamic warmups a lot of times, but I really like contrast training. And folks will always go like, well, but you should only use contrast training for peaking. I'm like, listen, man, have you ever actually trained people in the real world?
Yeah.
Like you have time constraints, and it's like, how can I get the most out of this session?
Yeah.
Get them in and out in an hour 15,
Yeah.
maybe it's 50 minutes, right? I have to think about those things.
Everybody
So
on
that
Twitter has a great periodization model until they actually have to interact with a real person.
Yep, that's exactly it.
We interrupt this podcast with a quick reminder that this episode is brought to you by AG1. It's an NSF certified all-in-one superfood supplement that features 75 whole food sourced ingredients designed to support your body's nutritional needs. I use this product daily myself, and a ton of our athletes do as well. Head to drinkag1.com/Cressey and claim my special offer of 10 free travel packets with your first purchase. AG1 gives you peace of mind that you're covering all your nutritional bases. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Cressey, CRESSEY, and you'll get that special offer.
So to me, that that R4 is like, it could actually be kind of conjoined together with R5, which is resistance training. And resistance training, I think it was Cosgrove that first, the first time I was kind of like, yeah, I actually split that up into strength training and resistance training. All right, strength training is like actually training to get stronger. And for to simplify this, obviously it's the lower rep ranges, it's all the different methods that we can kind of apply into that. Resistance training now might be like, hey, we're trying to build some muscle. Like maybe we're doing, we're working on strength endurance, right? If maybe it's the tempo method and this is what they need to improve. Like again, we're gonna zap out and assess what the athlete needs and then plug it in. R6 is resilience. That's our conditioning, right? That's our cardio. And obviously, I've been again very fortunate. Like one of my closest friends and neighbors, Joel Jamison.
You've got to know,
I can,
especially if you need a helicopter ride, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's a very useful guy. But actually, I was literally just on the phone with him earlier on. But so there's a whole world there, which honestly, like I've really dove into, and I've been fortunate too to like build Morpheus on the back end. So I've just been so into it and like became really good in just the integration of how to integrate conditioning programs into strength and conditioning, which to be honest with you, like it's a very misunderstood thing in the industry.
Great.
Very misunderstood. And then R7 is recovery, right? And to me, it's just really like a cool down. We got some protocols if people have time. I just don't want them to finish a session, be crazy sympathetic, jump in their car, go into traffic, and still be stressed out. Like let's try to tune that down a little bit. So that R7 model, and then the way I like to explain it in simple ways. Imagine you got a big piece of the pie, and for example, and I'll take a general population person hasn't trained a lot. Maybe R3 is actually a big portion of the workout because dynamic warm-ups like a Spider-Man lunge, and a squat to stand, and that's actually challenging for them.
Yeah.
Right. So 50% of the workout might be R3, right? And then we're gonna put a smaller piece of the pie is gonna be, very small is gonna be R4, but we are gonna do some fast stuff with them, and then we're gonna have 30% of it be R5, and then we're gonna have some R6 cardio at the end. Right. But if I get a guy that's like extremely strong NFL, I mean, I literally just got somebody that's like, hey man, I got 6 weeks. Look, these are not ideal situations, right? Very strong, right? I mean, legitimately like love strength training, right? So he wants to clang and bang and lift heavy weights. But he's like, hey, but I want to work on my first step, especially not just forward, backward, but side to side, all lineman, right? And then we start breaking that down. Well, a big piece of the pie with him is like, his resistance training and strength training is just maintenance, right? But we're working more on rate of force development, speed, strength, strength, speed. So that training session breaks down very, very differently, right? And this is kind of like what I think makes it simple, because you can change the piece of the pie and you can always look at it through the R7 model. And you got a guy that comes in like, hey, listen, man, the coaches told me I got to put on 15 pounds of muscle. I mean, that was, for I would say when I trained I said Trevor, that was one of the things. It was like put on like 12, 13 pounds, like throw faster. Like a big chunks of the pie were actually building muscle through the first few phases, right? We were still working on other aspects of it and at least maintaining, and then towards the end, like we shifted it up, right? Because you also got to look at timelines. You have same thing, like you got an off season. Players will tell you like, this is how much time I have. You got somebody year round, it becomes much easier, right? To kind of break that I would say that pie down. So that's the lens that I'm looking through. I mean, we can dive deeper into any
No, I
one
think
of
it's
those.
good. Maybe stepping back, big picture. So obviously we got a little bit more granular with the nuances of like what's in it, but I think we both know the hardest thing is learn how to write a program. Like I wish there was a
Yes.
magic course that I could send every staff member to. And I'm not sure that I've found a better way than just getting them exposed to a ton of programs, writing a ton of programs, seeing what works, what doesn't, fall flat on your face. What advice would you give to young coaches, across any discipline that are looking to learn how to write good strength and conditioning programs?
I mean, it starts with the cookbook, man. So for example, I'll give my own like how I did it, and then how I share with people to do it. So if you found people that you're like you're looking up to, you aspire to be like, you're like, man, these folks are amazing. They usually have a cookbook, right? And the cookbook this is how we do things. I mean, if you take functional strength rolls from Mike Boyle, I mean, it is like a cookbook, right? You take, I mean, this is how we do this. This is how we do this. This is our basically our choice of exercises, right? This is our progression model, our regression model. Here's some lateralizations. So, and you're like, man, I think that's great. And they train a population that I would want to train, right? So then what you do is, number one, you do it, right? You have to experience the thing. Like there's just no way around that. Now, ideally, as you're doing it, you're already getting deliberate reps coaching others. Because what will happen is that, like, when you get enough reps, it'll click. You'll know, basically, you'll be able to get up in the middle of the night, have a person, and be able to run them through that model, right? And then what you do is you go and do another cookbook. And because the thing is, and there's no way around it, that at beginning you're going to have some confusion. And like, for instance, when you were learning program design, was there some confusion when you were like, hold up, this person writes it like this person writes it like that? And if you can just understand principles, which is, I think is so important to understand principles, like the law of specificity, the law of progressive overload, right? Like, I mean, the basics, but you can then look at that and go like, well, they're all doing the principles, but the way that they're approaching it is differently. But I think it's like, to become a chef, you have to be a great cook, right? And I think what happens a lot of times is that people don't go through this, the education of the principles and the basics, and then they're trying to make recipes, right? And then you got a problem. And so I can tell you, for me, like, I mean, I could probably recite the ultimate off-season manual, like word for word for you. So, the amount of times that I went through, I mean, I bought every program for every person that I was like, this is a great coach. And I would do it, right? And some of the programs were completely unapplicable to like the population that I was training. But I was still putting myself through the ringer. Cosgrove was always I would say, a person that I learned from in the semi-private general population realm, because that's who he was coaching. A lot of, like, I would say, general fitness, body transformation, building muscle, drop body fat. And, I was probably in his mentorship, I think 15 years ago, if not more. Same thing. Templates, right? Training people through it a ton. And it's like, I always gravitated, and this is probably my philosophy on training, if I had to pick one, was very much so that, conjugate, because I learned a lot from Louis, and then it's like, you took that model and turned it into, this is how you train athletes through it. And
you did it. I mean, that was what you were doing as a basketball player without even knowing what conjugate was probably at the time.
100%, right?
Because it made intuitive sense.
It made intuitive sense. And two, like, I was training through so many different ways that made sense to me. And to this day, I still use it because it's not like I haven't veered off and, kind of did little phases of anything else. But if I had to do one thing for life, that made sense. And to me, that is the athlete for life model. Like, hey, listen, like it's like you don't have to pick and choose and do blocks. Like blocks are just so unrealistic in real world, whether it's with athletes or general pop. Like,
Yeah.
oh, we're gonna do like a strength building block for like 8 weeks, and then we're gonna do that. Doesn't make sense. And
We're
by
gonna
it's
detrain it
not
while
as
we work on other stuff for the next 12.
yeah, it's like just it's not a real thing,
Yeah.
and it's not as enjoyable either, right? Because what I started realizing through training people a certain way is that even folks that didn't come and say, "Hey, I want to be more athletic," but Scott, who just turned 70, we started doing med ball throws and box jumps, and the guy lights up. It's like, man, I really like this training. But he didn't
Yeah.
come in and say, "Hey, listen, I want to do throws and jumps."
Yeah.
Right? He's like, I want to, my hips are tight. I got to get stronger.
Yeah.
But they enjoy it. And I think there's something in our nervous system that has something to do with play and who we were as kids that, that kind of fires that stuff up. And, I mean, I could go down the stat line all day. A person, 1 out of 3 people over the age of 55, when they fall, they break their hip. And then they're out for 8 months. They gain over 20 pounds. Mortality goes up.
Mortality goes sky high, right?
It's high. It's nuts, right? Like, so we all need it, but there's this, we also know, people throw this all the time, the interference effect, right? We know it doesn't have as much, really kind of effect in training programs if you do it the right way, if you organize in a smart way. So yeah, you can do strength training, and you can do power training, and you can do muscle building, and you can do conditioning. You can combine it if you understand the principles.
Exactly.
And people can get all these benefits. And so, but the thing is, it's very difficult to just become great at this in theory. I mean, it's impossible, to be honest with you, right? You have to do it yourself. You have to do it with a lot of clients. But imagine the feedback loop. Like, so I'll give an example. If I go to your facility, and I remember I came out, 2006, 7, or whatever it was, right? Like
07. Yeah, you're
07.
First off season.
The first one in the brick building. That place was so dope.
The dungeon.
I was I think I was there for 7 days, 8 days.
It was a good week. I remember it well.
And it was, I mean, it's still super clear in my mind. And I mean, I was there at least once a day, right? At least. But it was like, get my training session in with you guys or with the athletes that you were training, watch stuff, talk to you guys. Feedback loop was fast, right? It was really fast. Like, so if you're kind of in isolation and you're doing stuff, at the end of 30 days, if you're doing it wrong, you've done a lot of repetitions doing it wrong. But if I'm around people that have been doing it for a long time and are great at what they do, and it's like, hey, Luka, when you do that, man, you're way too extended. Exhale so you get out of lumbar extension. Great job. Okay. Hey, why did you tell me to do that? Well, my feedback loop is not, bam, I do it better. I understand it. So, I mean, even training there for 7, 8 days, I'm learning like very fast, and then if you go, hey, you should probably go read the anatomy of breathing, boop, order, like next week I'm reading it. And the thing is, you can't do that when you're away from people, when you're not kind of thinking about the apprenticeship model, when you're not doing it yourself. Because when you write a program, I mean, I've done that a ton of times at the beginning, right? I write a program, do it myself, and I go like, this shit took me an hour and 45 minutes. Like this is completely unrealistic for somebody else. Or when you look at, people write a program and they put tempos in there and you calculate it. Like, this is a 2 hour and 15-minute workout. Like
this set took 8 minutes.
This is crazy, right? So you have to do it. I really truly think that, right now, if you go home and you cook for your girl and it's like, you're gonna get a cookbook. You don't know what the hell you're doing. Follow the directions to the T, make a great meal. Do that for a long time, learn the principles. Then you start understanding like, oh, okay, if I put in salt here and I feed it a little bit longer, if I could smoke this, it will taste this way, right? But it takes time. It takes a lot of reps. And then you start getting it and you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take that recipe and try a little bit of my own stuff. Ooh, that tastes good. Now you're starting to become a chef, right? And you got to go through the cook phases. I think it's happening less and less. And I think because obviously online, which, hey, it's great. Like I can buy your course. I can go through it. In this space, there is no way to be a phenomenal coach without like getting your hands dirty, without being around other people that have been there, done that, or doing it at the highest level. It's just impossible. You need those fast feedback loops, and that's a superpower.
I love that. And you're a guy who's evolved a lot. I mean, obviously you're a voracious reader. We've kind of talked about a lot of the things, and you go out and you try to experience different things. What's been the biggest growth area for you over the past year? What have you changed that, maybe you wouldn't have been as open to a decade ago?
Hmm, that's a really good question. I mean, I would say in the training space, for here's what I've thought about a lot. Is the experience of a session,
Mhm.
right? So maybe not as much. And let me like, I know you've read this
Yeah,
book, The Power of Moments by Chip
yeah,
and Dan Heath. I know you love Chip and Dan Heath. Like
yeah,
I think the first book that you recommended to me, I think it was called Decisions. But
yeah,
I've read all of their stuff.
yeah. Great stuff.
And but that book for me was a really really pivotal a long time ago, and I kind of reread it because when you start understanding an experience, people have they remember the peak, the low, and the ending of an experience.
Yeah.
So if you look at a training session, right? And I'll take a group training session and I'll kind of break it down to even a semi-private. So, ideally you obviously have a great coaching session and there's some type of peak. Peak might be a PR, somebody throws their fastest pitch, right? Like they get their best trap bar deadlift. That's probably a peak. Hopefully you have peaks and not lows and somebody
Right.
tweaks something, right? But I think the highest ROI, is the ending.
Mhm.
And there's so much studies that like you could actually have a great experience and just the ending wasn't good.
Yeah.
People will remember that.
It's
So
like the
why would
amazing meal at a restaurant where the waiter just takes forever to bring you your check.
exactly?
Yeah.
I mean, that's that, and it's like it was great, but like you can't forget about the shitty ending, right?
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you spend a lot of time and energy like orchestrating the ending to where people leave on a peak? And this, by the way, this can be for everybody. I teach a lot in group training because people would start saying like, "Oh, do you always do a finisher?" I'm like, "Yeah, almost always." And then somebody says some dumb from like but do you not think that's going to be too much on the
Gonna
like?
burn them out.
Listen,
Yeah.
man, it's like a 2 to 3 4 minute thing where people
Yeah.
get a pump, like a abs,
Yeah.
glute finisher or whatever. Like nobody's gonna be affected by the recovery. But here's what it does, right? Towards the end, we get people that like struggle together, and I love that saying, right? It's
Yeah.
like pain shared is pain divided, happiness shared is happiness multiplied, right? So people in an environment, a community are going through something challenging. It's not insane, but like, and it bonds them. And then at the end, I bring everybody in. I usually tell us, I got this from Martin Rooney and like been doing it for 15 years. I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to make a point. I'm going to bring something up that's going to make people think or maybe feel something, right?
Mhm.
And then we're going to bring it in. All right, guys, team on three, right? So my last 5 minutes are orchestrated, and it's like everybody leave. Like the ending was like people are fired up, right? So I spent a little bit of time and created a system where now people leave on a high note. And if somebody said, "How was it?" Man, that was so awesome,
Mhm.
right? But you could have left on a no, and it's
Yeah.
like nobody will remember it that much, right? And by
Mhm.
the way, same thing goes like it's little stuff. At the end, athlete gets done with the training session, and it's like, man, I'm at Fitbar. I got you a PB&J with a. I know you like that extra protein in it. Oh man, like, damn, bro, like I got you. It's cool, right? But it's like a little thing. In it doesn't. Not to say that like I'm not always studying. We can kind of go over like what I'm into right now on the training side of things, but it's like that part I think is so much more powerful because going back to what we said at the beginning, like the environment stuff, right? If somebody can feel a certain way when they leave and they can't wait to come back,
Yeah.
right? The way that we get people to change is that they buy into what we're saying. So then
Yeah.
the little simple things, hey, listen, man, these 2 drills is going to help you with your hip and turn rotation. Please, like Netflix and stretch, Netflix and do this mobility drill, man.
Yeah.
And I've had guys that bought in and like, I got a 330 offensive line guy that was with the Seahawks. He's going to be somewhere else this year, but it's like this dude went home every day and did the drill. And all of a sudden, like you got this 330 guy that's doing, his mobility is wow, like just really, really good. But he's like, yeah, man, I just do everything you tell me to do because I believe it, right? I mean, that's what you
It's the
want. And
goal.
those environmental things are things that kind of slowly chip at that person, whether it's
Mhm.
nutrition, whether it's sleep. I know how much you're same thing. Like, I'm like, man, we're doing all these things and your sleep is like it's, you're playing video games, you're watching TV late at night. Like, let's 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 get that better because you get them to buy in that that's the thing that's going to get them a little bit faster, They won't be as so sore after every training session, so on and so forth. Like if they believe that, they're like, you know what? Yeah, let me get a sleep ritual. Let me go to sleep a little bit earlier. And yeah, over the next week, it's not going to do much. But man, by the end of the off season, that guy's a better athlete, better results, better games. That plateau that they had, they buzzed through it. And so I started, and I used that book because there's a lot of examples of how to orchestrate a better moment for the person to have a aha insight. And I think that for coaches, um, studying that to make as many of those moments for their clients and athletes
Mhm.
is an absolute game changer. Because what
I
it
love
does
that.
is it basically, the stuff that you do and you say, it compounds it at a whole nother level, right? Because you already know, like if in the off season I do something 4 times versus if I do it 400 times,
Mhm.
and it's a little thing, it's going to be massive by the end of the off season or during the in season. It's like, hey man, if you could just do this thing for arm care, like here's these 3 drills, just
Yep.
please do them every day. Like here's what it's going to do. But they do those 3 drills throughout the whole season. Like they're a better athlete, right? They have better recovery. They're not going to have maybe that little nagging injury that's going to then prevent them from throwing, 3 miles an hour faster, every single time. Like that's the type of stuff. And so we have to kind of pull back the curtain and understand human psychology, environments, and sociology, like in some ways, as far as like how we get people to do stuff.
I love that, man. What about on the training side? Like what's something that's getting you excited right now? What are you looking into that's kind of like a next frontier that you think could be really impactful for your athletes?
I've dove way back into speed training.
Mhm.
And it's not like, I've done a lot of study and education on it. What actually spurred me a little bit was my brother's done like now 3 levels of the Altus mentorship.
Mhm.
And so then I kind of, I was like, you know what? Let me go back through all this, got all the Altus courses. Stu's a good friend too. I was out there with John Berardi before they moved to Atlanta, out in Scottsdale, watching him do work. And it was like, that was so, watching like the most skilled people on the planet do their
Mhm.
thing can do only one thing, right? It fires you up and it makes me be like, oh man, like, you watch Dan Paff do stuff, you watch Stu do stuff, and you're like, I need to take my, I need to take this up another notch. And that really like kind of spurred me to dive deeper into it.
Mhm.
As well as, and then I kind of went down a rabbit hole. Like it's been cool. Derek Hansen is a good friend. He's up in Vancouver. We had him down here for a speed seminar. I talked to him
Mhm.
a lot. It's cool because I'm able to text him and call him, and went through Les Spellman stuff. Les was out here. So just finding it, and I had Lee on the show, kind of went back through all his products, especially because he does a lot of stuff on speed for basketball training, and
Mhm.
I've been doing S&C for a pretty high level high school program in basketball. So I dove back into that. So that's been really, really kind of tickling my fancy. And then I would say, measuring some of that. This is the other part, and they kind of do go together. Is um, isometric training, is specifically like testing.
Mhm.
I'm about to get like probably the Hawkins dynamic stuff. Talk to Mike Robertson a lot about it.
Yeah.
He's dove into
Hawkins
it.
great.
Mike's awesome with it. And my brother does all the testing for the soccer guys. With
Yeah.
they have Val there in Slovenia. We just had Alex Natera come out and do it one day, and I went through all Alex's stuff, which is awesome. So that's been helpful because I geek out, not just for myself. I mean, look, I'm going to say like there's an ego part to this. This whole idea of athlete for life. I'm going to turn 43. I think that I can crush most 20-year-olds in most things, and I do have, but it's not. It's almost like this experiment, right? Because most of the pro athletes that I train, I still have this little, like I'll race you, like, oh, you only lift that much, I can
Yeah.
lunge way more than you, type of thing. But in a smart way, is like understanding all of this at the highest level
Mhm.
possible, and then integrating it. And like the reality is that testing, especially with higher performance guys, it does help. Like
Mhm.
most of the NFL guys now, they bring me their VALD scores, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, look, like hamstrings are way underdeveloped. Here's my rate of force development. Here's this, here's that. And being able to look at that. Another person I forgot to mention is Daniel Bovey. He's doing great stuff
Yep.
with the quadrant system, and takeoff. And so I've been going through a lot of that because it's really helpful to be able to break everything down to a pro guy and go like, here's what's happening here, here's what we need to do, and then being able to show them progress. And for a lot of these guys, they'll just go back to the VMAC, get a test,
Yep.
bring me the scores back again, which is super cool, and be like, told you so type of thing. And they're like, oh man, like you're right, so that the combination of that and then how to apply it at each level. So obviously, we're not going to do a ton of force plate testing with my small group personal training or certain folks. But you know what? With semi-privates, by the way, people love that. Like, you think that a general pop client doesn't want to do a test and see how they're better? We have in-house physical therapy with high def. Like now, there's 3 full-time PTs in here. They're always, people coming back from knee and ACL rehab. They're doing the ISO tests. But it's like a mom comes in and the PT guy's yelling like, come on. Tony's down there yelling and they're like, hey, you beat your score. And you just see them light up, right? This person doesn't even train. They're here for rehab.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to understand that there's just parts of us. That's why we have a PR bell, that people are driven by that, and being able to stack wins and show them that they're getting better is intrinsic motivation, right? Competence drives intrinsic motivation. So if we can understand these things, how can we, plug it in a way that's scalable? Because I do understand, like, some of these tests, I can't do it with large groups. But can we have, like, this is the stuff that I'm thinking about, like, hey, every 12 weeks we have a test day for my small group, right? And we're doing like, hey, we're going to do a 3RM, or guess what? We're going to test some velocity stuff with the output monitor, right? And you would be surprised at, like, again, this person that you think doesn't care about, performance and what their meters per second is on a trap bar deadlift with a certain weight. But it's like, Susie beats Jenny and Jenny's like, let me have another go at this one, right? And we want that, man. Like, I love the idea of, you watch my small groups and it's like people that you don't think are going to be competitive all of a sudden have the eye of the tiger. It's like, whoa. And like, man, like, because that's going to transfer to life, right? That's going to get them better results. It's going to fire them up. That's part of that community and that society. Is like, man, when I come here, and that's what people will say, like, they don't necessarily know how geeky I'm about, program design, right? Like, or understand everything. But what they do know is they go like, man, I'm able to do stuff I've never been able to do.
Exactly.
I'm able to, like, I couldn't even believe at this age that I could jump this high, lift this much weight. And like, I get pushed. I would never do this by myself. I would never do this at this other gym that I go to. But here, like, I get the most out of myself. And so, I mean, hopefully those dots connect, right? Like the power of moments and experiences. And then, like, how do we not take too much technology, but the right amount, and then use it to accentuate, like, what we're doing, get people more fired up, show them that they're getting better, show them that, like, the place that we basically coached them out of is the environment for them to get better. Because that's the stuff that, like, hey, listen, somebody goes like, how is it there, man? You got to come through.
Yeah.
Tell them, like, we do this, we do this, we do that. And it's, and like, man, I get goosebumps. I don't know about you, man. Like, I get goosebumps talking about this stuff. Cause like 20 years in, like, I couldn't be more fired up about what I do. And, we talked about this before we went live, but how do you, like, I have no desire to, like, oh man, just work on the business, stop. I did that for a while. I was like, man, I didn't enjoy it. Like, I mean, I'm always working on the business, but like, I love coaching. Like, I think it's the most honorable craft there is. And hopefully if anybody's listening to this and they're a coach, man, like, every morning, if you don't get up and just, like, count your blessings for what you do and what we do. And you should, and by the way, ethically, I believe you got to give it your best. Ethically, I believe you got to be a pro at it. And being a pro is meaning to become the best coach you can be, having integrity, working on communication skills. Like, unlike an athlete, which, there is an end date. No matter how long you go, if you're LeBron, like, there's an end date, right? But as a coach, tell me what's the end date. I'll get better every day until the day I die. And it's like, how cool is that, right? How cool is that? So don't take that for granted, and make sure that you're always curious and always getting better.
That's good stuff. Lightning round, stolen blatantly from Mike Robertson. Give me 2 books that you've recommended or gifted, maybe to young athletes or young coaches, that you think could help them in their the years ahead.
Do I really have to keep it to 2? That's my counter question.
It's not a lightning round if we do the long list, right?
Okay, so
Then we just turn around and hit the bookshelf right behind you, right?
yeah, no, it's a tough one. Here's what this will probably throw some people off, I think, but I'll give you like 3 to 4 that like I want all my interns or even new coaches to read. And none of them have anything to do with coaching. Um, the fifth one might be a coaching one I think is helpful, but here's like how to win friends and influence people. I know it's been said a lot of times, but like, I mean, that's a reread for everybody. The Leader with No Title by Robin Sharma. The Go Giver by Bob Berg.
Good one, for sure.
Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi.
Yep.
And then 2 that are communication books. One is Crucial Conversations. And then another one's called The Coaching Habit, which is excellent. Short read, very simple. Now, why would I say those books? I think that obviously I'm a massive believer in, we just talked about how much, studying training, studying the body, learning from the best, like shadowing. But those ones, I tend to realize that like this field, and let me know if you disagree with this, by the way. It's kind of like the restaurant industry in some ways, where it's like I feel that to be really successful, you do need to have somewhat of a servant mentality. I really do. Like the longer I've been in it, the more I realize that like that's one of the key ingredients to being successful. As Danny Meyer calls it, the service reflex.
Yeah.
Right. It's like that your natural tendency is to like serve. And those books, one, kind of give you a good like frame, perspective around treating people well, which I'm sure everybody here has heard it, right? People don't care about what you know until they know how much you care, right? But and that is so true, that if you could know all the stuff, if a person doesn't think and believe that you care, and you don't, and you don't communicate well, you don't treat people well, it won't matter, right? Nobody wants to have basically a great knowledgeable coach as head. Like it's just not going to work out. So to me, that like lays the framework. And then sometimes even, I've had conversations where I'm like, hey, I don't believe this is for you. No judgment, no, but I just like you have like there's stuff that like can't be taught. And have you ever heard of the 51 rule?
No.
Danny Meyer's 51 rule?
Read a bunch of his stuff and I haven't heard that.
It's one of my favorite things, and it's kind of like what he talks about when it comes to hiring, right? And basically to him, like, the technical expertise somebody has is 49 out of 100 points. So if you're the best in the world, so let's take coaching, right? Man, like you could recite every attachment and insertion point, like, the vectors of force production, coaching, all that stuff, right? But if you're elite at that, you're 49 out of 100, right? 51 is that human factor. That's empathy, communication, being a team player, compassion. And the analogy that he has is like, that a lot of businesses, it's like they shine bright and attract the moth, right? But it's like once the moth comes to the light, it's actually one of those neon lights that are cold. And that's basically, if your business is 49, like I'm great at marketing, I'm great at this stuff, I'm great, but you don't have that warmth, where it's just like, man, I truly, like when I come in, like, I'm like, man, this person's not getting results. I got to figure this out. Like, I'm going to go home and study a little bit more. I got to, I really care about them, right? I truly believe that a lot of, in any service industry, that if you don't have that, it's going to be really difficult to be exceptionally successful. Because it is, I mean, the definition of a client in the dictionary is to be under someone's care.
Yeah.
And, the amount of people that kind of like, I mean, I just had like some kind of challenging conversations with some clients that, as we've hired coaches and, hired new coaches and let some people go and so on and so forth, is, and it was a powerful thing to come from a client and said, well, you're like, I just distinguished, trainers versus versus coaches. And I said, oh, tell me what you mean by that. It's like, well, it's not like they're bad people, but they're coming in and they're just kind of like doing their thing, getting in, getting out, like
checking the box,
running the box, running the program. But it's like the coach is like curious. They ask me stuff. They want to know how I feel. Like you could tell that they care. they don't look at the time, because afterwards it's like, hey, could you do some tempering on my forearm? And it's like, I don't get paid for that type of thing, right? Like, oh, okay, I got to get out of here. Why do you got to have to get out of here? Because I want to watch a show at home. Like, people feel that. And be a coach, don't be a trainer. And I think that 51 rule, is, it really comes down to, like, Danny Meyer says, like, hey, you got to hire 51ers, and then you can teach them. I can teach anybody to 49, but man, it's so difficult, impossible to teach to 51, right? And it really, hopefully that comes to, like, hopefully that kind of, like, rings the bell, and makes some folks kind of, fired up about this, because it's like, if you have the work ethic and you have the desire and you have the curiosity, you can have an incredible career in this industry. And when we started, how much stuff was there and how much wasn't there, right? Like, it was, man, like, so much of what's available today was not there. But this is the foundation of it. Like, I don't care what, about your social media and this, that, the other. If, when you're with the person, like, you can't have that 51er side, it's going to be tough.
Absolutely. What about presenters? I know you've been to a ton of seminars, you travel all over the world. Are there a couple of presenters that you've seen that were super impactful for you that you would recommend to just about any up and coming coach to see?
Yeah, I really think so. Here's the thing. Depending on where you are, kind of, seasons of life, I think some folks have kind of been, like, very, like, whoa, this is all, like, for example, when I first did FRC, functional range conditioning, I was like super impactful for me. And at that point in time, maybe I even was, like, a little too gung-ho about it. But you know what? In that phase, it was very valuable, doing that. So I still love, I love that. Alex is awesome. Alex Natera is awesome. And as a presenter as well, again, I mentioned that I was very interested in that. And I think if you couple what am I curious about, and then you get a great person to communicate that, that's going to be a awesome thing. Derek's been awesome. Honestly, he's a very, very great teacher and communicator, very chill. And I think it's very simple to understand, by the way, right? People can leave his, I would say, speed training seminars and workshops, and, like, the next day start applying this stuff while they understand it. So he's been, and two, I told Derek, I was like, you should have a business that does those little infographics, because he hit me up, was like, dude, I'll do them for you if you want. And if you watch his infographics on injuries and speed training and stuff, like, in a very, I would say, small amount of space, he's relaying very useful information that I can actually take stuff from, right? And I mean, here's basically the person that was learning for I don't know how long from Charlie Francis, and was the person that was able to take what was in Charlie's head and communicate it in a very, very simple way that people can use. And I think that's really the mark of a great coach. So he's definitely been, and if he's listening to this, maybe I don't tell him enough, but he's definitely been a great influence on me for application. Let's see.
Previous podcast guest. He was
awesome. Yeah.
John O'Neill interviewed him. It was an excellent one. So definitely check back on it.
I'll go back and listen to your one. And two, like, because I train so many athletes now, I mean, in just the injury aspect of it, the Achilles, the knees, especially in football, it's been, those conversations are very valuable for me, and then, like, digging in and doing the stuff to do my best to prevent, because it's obviously a complex issue. But yeah, he's definitely been up there. What I've been kind of rolling through on the nutrition side of things is PN Academy. And like, back in the day, I kind of signed up for it, but I've gone through all of those, like, mini certification modules. And honestly, that's been really good, because I'm kind of a weirdo, like, as far as, like, I study a lot of stuff. I mean, if you looked at my tabs on my computer, you'd probably be shocked and have a little bit of a issue, because then there's, like, what am I studying in marketing? What am I studying here? Right? Like, I'm just endlessly curious. And there's a part of my brain that's like, you're a coach, here's the compartment of coach, right? And then there's, like, here's the part of the brain that's, okay, business owner, educator, how do we do content? How do we marketing? How would you do that? And I think I've done a pretty good job over the years, just really compartmentalizing those things, and actually piecing them together. I would like to share one thing, because I've spoke on it quite a bit now, is the use of content to become a better coach. I think a lot of people kind of I would say, have these negative connotations to content. But I think that if you do it the right way, even as an upcoming coach, when we started, like me and you would write a lot. I mean, obviously you inspired me to write a lot, and I've written hundreds and hundreds of articles, before there was video, and then I started doing video, and my YouTube is 1,800 videos now, right? Like, I mean, but I used it as like, if I learned something from you. I remember when we did a shoulder seminar at the Old Vigor, that you came through and did. Like, I did I don't know, like 5,000 word blog post sharing my insights on your seminar, because it made me distill the things that I learned, try to organize them in a way that was simple to explain to others, and it made me a better coach, right? If I put a camera on you and say, hey, listen, break down the biggest mistakes in a Bulgarian split squat and how to fix them in 90 seconds for a reel, you gotta be pretty good at communicating that, right?
Yeah.
So if you can look at content, not just like, ooh, let me go viral, let me be an influencer, but rather like, how can I become a better communicator and coach? I think those two things, like, I create content, I apply it in the real world, 1+1 = 3, and just use it for the right reasons. Because same thing, like if I say, hey, in 2,000 words, can you break down this podcast and what you learned and something practical that you can take away from it? Guess what? Like, you're going to have to think, you're going to have to distill, you're going to have to organize, right? And it's like, you're going to be, you're going to remember it better. And as we know, that you retain way more information if you teach it. Like, actually, that's the highest level of retaining information, is distilling, writing it out, and then presenting it to somebody else.
That's awesome stuff, man. And a really probably good place to wrap up. Where's the best place for folks to find you if they want to learn more about you and the gym and all the above?
I'll probably give 4 places. I mean, on IG, Instagram, I share a lot of stuff. So it's at Luka Hocevar, LukaHocevar. On YouTube, I do a lot of stuff on YouTube these days. Same thing, just plug in Luka Hocevar. The gym is vigorgroundfitness.com. So if you're in the Renton, Seattle area, always welcome to come out and check it out and see what we do. And then on lukahocevar.com is where I have my educational resources. So I do a lot of now courses, workshops, go into some continuity stuff, all for coaches. Basically, it's the education of coaches, and kind of really, really having not just fun with that, but really enjoying that, like learning and then sharing the stuff that I do.
I love it. This is great stuff, man. I really appreciate you taking time. Like I said, it was long overdue, but very well worth the wait. So thanks for carving out some time in your schedule.
And thank you for having me on. Appreciate it, brother.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. We really appreciate you carving out some time in your schedule to listen, not just to this episode, but also to some of the episodes from our archives. If you enjoy what you heard, we'd love it if you'd share it with friends, colleagues, and teammates, as well as leave us a review on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Thanks again for your time.